Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I know this support for mentors and mentees is fantastic. I joined right at the inception of the scheme and took part and have really enjoyed being able to be a mentor for people on the scheme. But I know we've got mentees here as well, so that's excellent. So I've just popped in the chat. You should be able to see a hyperlink to the Research Leadership Academy, and it's at the bottom of my slide there. So I just wanted to alert you to that. I'm the Clinical Academic Training Lead and the Deputy Theme Lead for Capacity Development in South London for the Applied Research Collaboration. There's 15 of these collaborations in England, and as part of that I developed a Research Leadership Academy, which originally we ran for just South London in 2022, all of London in 2023, and then in the autumn I'll open up applications for England/UK. Honestly, I don't mind who would like to come, as long as it's useful for you. Everyone is most welcome. So it is linked to the ARCs, but all of the ARCs have their partner organisations, so you're probably affiliated somewhere. I think it's free, it's online. There is an option to meet in person at the beginning and the end, but not compulsory. And we record everything, so out of the lecture programme, so it's very flexible to work around you. We take breaks at Easter, half term, etc. So I just popped the link in the chat. You can read what it's about. You can see our evaluation report from 2022. We're in the middle of the 2023 one, and we have people who might be health and social care professionals, researchers, clinical academics, clinicians, and anyone doing their PhD, anyone who'd like to join is most welcome. And we have outstanding lineup of speakers. We have action learning sets you can join. And for those who haven't used mentorship, although obviously here I'm talking to the converted, we do help you to approach a mentor for a one-off session just to introduce people to mentorship. So the applications, as I say, will open in the autumn, and do feel free to share the link with other people who you think might be interested, particularly from anyone from underrepresented groups, because we are really keen to make sure we're inclusive. So that's a special plea, is to please share with anyone who you think who would really benefit to support the diversity of our future research workforce. So, and there's a link in the chat, the link I've put in the chat, there's also a link which is expression of interest. So if you would like to add your name on the expression of interest, we'll get us in touch with you as soon as the portal opens for applications. But the last 2 years I've taken everyone who's applied, so please feel encouraged to apply. Yeah, lovely. Also, finally, I will probably run it in 25 and 26 because the ARCs have had extended funding now. So the chances are I'll still have that link with the project and be able to continue it. So if you don't want to do it next year, don't worry, there'll be another 2 years to come. Lovely. So just in the chat, I'm going to pop my some of my links on Twitter, Orchid, LinkedIn, just for your information in case you want to follow up with me on anything. And today I'm delighted to talk to you about hot topics in mentorship, broadening our research mentorship capability. So whether it's linked to topics you want to think about as a mentee or as a mentor, I've just got a range of topics and some ideas I have to support people with these areas. Now, obviously, in a mentorship session, you may have the style of mentorship session, which is where, you know, very much the mentor is driving topics they wish to raise and the mentor can give, you know, expert facilitated guidance. But sometimes we also, what might be termed coaching in some areas, sometimes the two definitions get flipped, don't they? But sometimes we give a little bit of coaching as well about, have you thought about this? There's this possibility. I could give you an introduction. There's also those elements which also are in there. So I'm just going to run through some key areas and give you some ideas. And it might just trigger something for you to think, oh, that would be good for me to ask my mentee, have they thought about this? Or as a mentee, you might think, actually, I haven't really considered that area at all. I should consider it. So if I could go to my next slide. Thank you. Lovely. So first of all, your online profile. If you're a clinician, sometimes you don't have a web page. No one can find you. And sometimes that's quite frustrating. So for for example, I often am seeking people to recommend for different situations, perhaps a funding panel or someone who's an expert in a topic to help join a collaborative bid, etc. If we can't find you, it's really, really tricky. So if you want to be a research leader, I do think there's all kinds of very, very well-known mechanism. So number one, ORCID. If you're an academic, you probably have to have that. It's spelled ORCID. ORCID. So ORCID, an ORCID account is like a basic requirement if you're going to be a researcher. And usually when you're applying to publish, you have to give your ORCID number. So that's one platform, and it will pop up on a search. LinkedIn is super useful because you can put some of your CV in there. And when I'm meeting people for the first time, I will normally look them up on LinkedIn. So that's where I can see their background. It helps me connect with people. And I can see all kinds of different ways which I could link up. Twitter, it may or may not be something you want to get involved with, but if you do, I do think often you pick up quite useful ideas from people who you're connected with. The other two are ResearchGate and Google Scholar. So these are 5 I'd recommend: ORCID, LinkedIn, Twitter, ResearchGate, Google Scholar. As long as you're on something, people will be able to find you. So, and the more you have, the better. The second point there is having an area of expertise in terms of your career trajectory. I sit on panels for Wellcome Trust, for NIHR, I have done for the ESRC. And one area we're looking at is, has this person kind of are they developing in a particular direction? Are things starting to align here? Now, I do decision-making research, so I do quite a broad range of topics for decision-making, but generally everything's linked to decision-making. So you want to have some kind of area of expertise. And why is this important? Because people need to know what you're known for. So they can go, I know someone who's good at that, so-and-so. So if somebody asked you, what are you known for? You want to have some kind of area of expertise, and that's definitely helps you to get more and more expert in your field. Now, the way to do that doesn't have to be, I know some of you very impressively have got onto the NIHR doctoral scheme. It's incredibly competitive. So congratulations to those of you who've managed to get onto any of those funded pathways. Really impressive. But it may be, for example, you're working with someone who could perhaps start doing a quality improvement project in their workplace. Something which really interests them, they're passionate about, they want to develop. So a quality improvement project is a way to get started and sometimes to apply your research in the practical field. So even if you're doing more advanced research, you can still go back and make that application to practice. You might need to do some courses. There's all kinds of ones here. Probably those of you already on a doctorate, that's probably your last formal education, but there's all kinds of NIHR or different academy types of courses out there in your specialism. You really need to know the people in your field. So if that's something you're a bit weak on, spend some time looking people up. Look up, you might have read their research paper, but have you looked up their web profile? Have you ever spoken to them? Have you reached out to them? Have you commended them on a particular paper they've studied? Have you shared your own ideas for research with them? Because they may well invite you into collaborative bids in the future if you do reach out to them. You also need to keep up to date on what the funders are interested in. What are their priorities? So know the funders who fund your kind of research, know what their priorities are. You might even be able to get in on some of those funding priority panels in the future. I've been on the HTA prioritization panel. So we make decisions on what the priorities are for those funding streams. So you can influence things, but just make sure that your work has some potential funding stream available, because if it's something which is very obscure or slightly out of date, it's going to be much, much harder for you to get the funding. But saying that, people used to not get funding very much for mental health research. Now it's very common. So, things do move on. You might be ahead of the game, not behind it. And also, obviously, as you publish, you'll get better known. So those are a few points there on that one. The next one is consider whether you could get onto any panels, boards or learned societies. if you're wanting a clinical academic career or a practitioner academic career, part of the ref submission is our environment statement. And the final section of the environment statement is all about what are you contributing in these types of roles back to your communities. So it's highly valued by universities and it's part of our civic engagement. And generally, even if you're working 100% in your practice field, you may well have an academic affiliation. So it is of interest, these types of areas. And they have enormous benefits for you in terms of getting you well networked with a whole range of people and being able to be influential in your field in terms of supporting developments, etc. So I currently have 8 of these types of roles, and I couldn't do my job if I wasn't doing them. I had great advice when I became a head of department at Brunel. They said have 50% externally facing. That's what kept me really on top of what the outside issues were. It kept our team ahead of the game and helped us really be agile and forward thinking in our areas. So do look at those. And usually the easiest ones to start with are something to do with your professional body. You often find that there's some roles within a regional group, or whether it's treasurer or something of a society within your profession, a specialist interest group. Those are the ones to start with. And then obviously build up. And some of the top ones nowadays are things like World Health Organization, government panels, SAGE, for example. All of those, get more and more competitive, but just start and build up your track record in those areas. The next one is being part of networks, collaborations, research groups and institutes. Now, ideally, if you Google your topic area, you'll find where these institutes are. They might be in the UK or they might be international. Find out if you can join them. Ask if you can be an honorary member, so you get on their email list, so you get invited to their speaker events. Try and sort of infiltrate and get known to those people, because that's where groups of people with a similar type of expertise have come together. The next one's funding, obviously super competitive to get, but always think, well, where am I at in the the grand scheme of things? What's sensible? So to start with, often people go for internal funding at their own organisation, or charitable funding or professional body funding. Those are often the ones which are a little bit more accessible. Then you might also want to consider, could I be a small part of somebody else's project? Someone who's got a stronger track record, I could join in with them. So that's where your networks would help you give some of those opportunities. And then later on, you're going to be a PI of your own work and gradually build up to a programme of research. So when we do the panels, I've been deputy chair on the NIHR doctoral panel. We're looking for people who potentially are our future professors, who can be leading international programs. Programs is the word when you get to the top of the range across their area of expertise. The next one is your outputs, as we call it in REF. I was on the REF sub panel, so I had to review 500 of them. So it was great reading about all the research being done by our professions. It might be in journals, it might be presentations, conferences. It's incredibly hard work. I don't know how much help ChatGPT is going to be to us, but I think it's really valuable to keep pushing to get those different publications out there, because that's really how it gets into the public domain. I would say now as well, if at all possible, and this might be where you have an organisational affiliation, is you really want to try and have your data in an open access repository as well. On the REF sub panel, I could see, obviously we've moved to open access for research publications, but quite a lot of the more impressive journals are starting to require people to put their data on open access as well. So the research councils used to always require that as part of their funding awards. And we do have things like Research Fish nowadays, but I think about those opportunities, because I suspect in the future that might be something which is also required. And it does help to reduce the burden on participants, because we can share data and we can support others to learn to do research, because they'll be able to practice their research skills on open repositories of health and social care data. The next one's research impact. So this is the reason why you do your research in the first place, is you want to make a difference. You want, that might be economically, socially, in terms of outcomes for patients. The REF has moved to 25% of the funding being related to research impact. That's 25% of 2.4 billion. 2.4 billion is our REF money. So it's an enormous amount of money going into universities and the collaborations they have with partner organisations. So they're very, very interested in impact. If you want an academic appointment, having research impact whilst you're doing your research and pushing that forward is very highly valued. So the other thing is to think about how you demonstrate your leadership skills, how you develop others. I know those of you who are successfully onto mentorship, onto funded fellowship awards will have already had these elements in your applications, but it's becoming more and more important. The government meeting, which looked at how we can better support funding to the research communities, identified this key element about we can't just have leaders who just win the money and do their projects. We have to have leaders who bring other people with them and provide us with the future workforce. So quite a lot of the funding bodies have tried to alter their criteria for applications, or the way in which people can provide that evidence. And they're trying to make careers more flexible. So they're taking away that rule about 5 years post PhD for some of the funding schemes, because they recognise people have different trajectories in their careers. So the more you can get involved with developing your skills to bring others on, like the Research Leadership Academy, which I've mentioned to you, the more training you get and the more you can give back to support others, that's going to be more and more highly valued in your funding awards. And the UKRI have changed their applications to this narrative CV, and it does have a much stronger emphasis on developing others. So look out for that, and do really share in your applications for any awards in the future that element. So those were my top tips, and I hope they were useful. And I think that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Scilla. That was absolutely great, that sort of whistle-stop tour. And I think that I really do think that both as for me as a mentor and for those that are mentees, it just helps us all to understand some of those topics, because I think, you know, for those of us that might have been doing PhDs quite a while ago and all the stuff that's gone on in between, we often learn that stuff on the way, but to have it pointed out so clearly is really, really helpful. So thank you very much.